Let me check first. Can you hear me? Thanks. So before I begin, let me nice things here. So right, hope my screen is visible to you. So all good. All good. Can you hear me? And the screen is visible. Okay. Thank you for the very nice introduction and thanks for inviting me for this workshop. So I would basically talk about publishing in science for like for an audience that has not got any experience in publications, and also I'll be spanning from there towards more broader perspective of publishing in science. And as the topic suggests, I'm more talking about the things that we should do rather than things we already know. So let me start. Okay. So so this is my first slide. So as you can see, I have used some terminology that perhaps would be conveying the same meaning, but in a more formal sort of a way. So this is a primer that I wanted to have in this discussion. So let's begin. My contents are, I'll introduce you to the publishing in science. What are the things that you may or may not know, and also the things, the current trends in publications and the formal way of publishing in science. Then I'll be moving towards a bit of an elaboration on what is a research paper, what sort of things that is covered in a research paper, and then I'll be talking about how to prepare yourself for writing. And then, of course, as the topic suggests, the effective research writing. I hope there is a little handout that I wanted you to have as we have this discussion. I think it's already shared with you. So if you can, please download and try to refer as we go along. Right now, it's not really not needed, but let's move on. So now, introduction to publishing in science. I would start with a more broader perspective, why this particular thing is needed. So it's not for the average audience. You are not writing for people who are reading newspapers, or general audience who are more in having a different pedagogy other than science or scientific notion. So what do you mean by an average audience? An average audience has a very little idea about the scientific reasoning, why science is needed, and what sort of causes and causalities are discussed in science, and the methodologies and the whole thing with whole pedagogy. If they don't have pedagogy of science, we call them average audience. But we have to communicate science to the mass audience in a different way. And this particular discussion today is not about mass communication of science. It's actually about communicating science to your peers in terms of scientific writing. And the next thing I want you to have in your mind is that no one is paid to read your work. So your peers are not reading your work just because they get something out of it. So if you cannot get into the audience, if you can't get the attention of your peers, then actually the writing in science in that sense has no meaning. So like for example, since we have somewhat a broader audience here, if you look at the school papers that you write in your school term papers, the teachers are actually paid to mark those papers. So they have to read whatever you write. And in order to mark you, they have to even read the small things that you do, and even they have to get an idea and then give you some marks. But when it comes to research paper, it's actually there, and nobody is paying anybody to read it. So it's your duty to make it clear and also attractive to the people, for the readers. Now, the last point that I want to mention before we begin this whole discussion is that people talk about research and they talk about doing projects, research, all sorts of things. But if you do not publish in research, it's actually cannot be considered as doing research. So doing research is analogous to publishing research work. Like there's a safe saying that nobody will hear a tree falling in a forest that there are no observers. So if there is no observer, then there would be trees that are fallen in the forest that no one hears. So the research work, if you do not publish, it cannot be considered as research. Now, again, this is sort of creating the mentality before we go into this discussion. When it comes to researchers or authors or great scientists, like the people have myths about them. Well, first thing is it's an inborn talent, right? There can be people with inborn talent, of course, but I'm not talking about the special people that have their inborn capabilities. I'm talking about when we train scientists, it's not an inborn talent. So definitely writing is not an inborn talent. It can be, but when it comes to the large audience, it's not something like that. And the second thing is your mother tongue needs to be English, like we call them native speakers, because we are communicating science in English. People think that you have to be a very good writer, I mean, a very good user in English, fluent user in English, which is not the case, because some people who are fluent in English may not be good science communicators. So that's the second bit that I want to debunk. And of course, when it comes to scientists, people have different opinions about them, like substance usage and some other eccentric behaviors. But definitely, the influence of anything else will not be contributing to science communications. Of course, there can be inspiration, but that's a different discussion. And certainly not a divine power. So you can't get for scientific writing just by going to some divine entity. So it's actually a trained skill. And also the way that you look at the problem helps you to understand and dissect the information in a way that you can become a better writer. So what makes a good writer? Some idea of what needs to be said. If you look at the current world, if you look at the social media or other places where people convey their messages, people don't have any idea of what they're talking about. So if you don't have a clear-cut idea, you cannot be a good writer. First thing is you need to have substance. You need to know what you're trying to say. If you don't know what you're trying to say, then you cannot be a writer. That's the first thing. You can say some jargon, you can say many words, etc., without any coherent meaning. So you need to have an idea of what you need to say. So this particular thing comes from the pedagogy. So if you look at science in general, there can be different disciplines, like you have physics, biological sciences, business sciences, psychology. You can think of many other domains as well, engineering. So if you don't have the pedagogy, the skill set, the narrative that you do in those subject areas, if you don't know the subject discipline, you can't actually create foreign ideas. That's why you are trained in that particular subject, that particular domain. The second thing is about clarity. So the first thing is having an idea, but there can be there are trained people even without a clarity of their ideas. So if you don't know what you really need to say, then you can't be a good writer. Yes, you have an idea, but you don't know what you are saying. The chronological order, the concept behind it, the linkage, the coherency. If you don't have this clarity, the clearness in your thoughts, you cannot be a good writer. You can write many things about many ideas, but it is open to interpretation. So people will not know what you are trying to say. And of course, the style part comes with a lot of practice, because if you look at different writers, for example, like mark down some great writers, like if you take Stephen Hawking, the physicist, you know how difficult it was for him to write, but his style is really, really clear. if you have read his, if you get the time to read his publications in physics, his writing style is also very clear. And also there are Richard Feynman's lecture series in physics that is also very clearly written. So people are there with a particular style, and that style gives them the foundation, the flavor that a particular scientist carries. So that actually happens with time and practice. So I hope that, that this particular discussion is not for inculcating style in someone, but actually it's about getting the idea from the disorganized aspects of it to more of a trimmed down clarity, more clear perspective. So that I want to clear at the beginning itself. So I have a little activity in the audience for the audience here, but I'm sorry for the general online audience, I can't do that. So I think it's communicated properly. So, yeah. Why I can't continue until it happens. So let's. So I'll talk about what this activity is about. So I'm sharing some handouts at the for the fun for the back row people. So they'll be writing some thoughts about what they see, and I'm going to see how that communication goes inside the audience. So give me 5 minutes for everything to be organized. I'm sorry, I may be shouting because I can't even hear my voice because of the background. So sorry for that. I can't move forward in the presentation because there is some explanation about the activity, so I would have to wait until this finish. Right, I can see someone using the chat. I know it's called that video. I hope you already got the PDF. It's with you, so please read it until this is sorted out. It's take 2-3 minutes. So once it is finished, I want the original the written part to be handed over to me. Just because it's very difficult to conduct a hybrid session. So now this activity is happening here. I'll just give me 2-3 minutes. I'll finish it and then I'll come back to it. So basically, once the participants here give me their opinion about what I have shared, I can proceed with the presentation because the contents are there in the presentation that they cannot see right now. If I make it on, then the whole activity is ruined. I need people not to see that. Let us make it quick. And I need the written one again. Delicious. Can't see that. Can't see the original. Let's go with the second one. Then fine. I'll move. Otherwise, it's waste of time. Okay. So this is what I have asked them to do. Let's move on. So can you collect the ones that they have written? I'll take one. Okay. Right. It's clear. So this is what I have shared with them. Now, okay. Right, this is a simple process of making a noodle. So you unwrap it and then boil the water and then mix the noodles and then keep for 2 minutes inside, and then you are ready to eat. So like imagine this is a process. This can be an experiment that you conduct, or this can be something that you read from a paper, right? So now I have the written things with me. So most of them have written about the process. Now, the first thing that I have with me is, it says, first we unwrap the noodles packet and put it into the bowl, then put some boiled water and close the bowl, then keep a few minutes, then you can eat, right? So that's the first write-up I have. The second one says, so it's from the cohort that I have here. Then someone else have written, unwrap a pack of noodles, add boiled water, and mix it with the seasoning, let it for 2 minutes, and enjoy your meal. So these are the two write-ups that I could collect because of the time frame and everything. So as you can see, if I read these two separately, everybody can see that they are describing the process in terms of stepwise progression. So what you start with and what you end up with. And also in between, you explain one by one what has happened. So if you imagine this process in an experiment, this is like explaining the methodology, like in a way that you describe it to the person sitting next to you. But imagine I put it somewhere else out of the context, and I ask some general audience elsewhere, the same education level, same ideas. And if I ask that particular person to read this and imagine what has happened, it would be very difficult for them to see what sort of a noodle. So there would be so much of questions, right? The clarity will not be there. And the second thing is, there is no philosophy behind it. So now in this process itself, like it can be viewed from different angles by different authors, different philosophers. The process can be explained at the very beginning. We call it the topic sentence. So we have to tell what sort of a thing is there. So that is the introduction part. Now, in both cases, I can see that the person who has written the text has assumed that I know about what is happening. So that is the first mistake that most of the writers do. They imagine that their peer, the reader, is aware of what they have done. So when it comes to scientific publications, introduction has the part to play where you demarcate the boundaries, the scope, and what sort of area that you are looking at. So that is the first step in this understanding. And then the way that this process is unveiled, it is more like the directions that you have used. Do this, do that, do this, do that. So in terms of a tutorial, in terms of an instruction sheet, that is acceptable. But when it comes to scientific research, you are introducing someone else's methodology. So you are not dictating terms to that other person, do this, do that, do this, do that. It has to be something that you have performed somewhere. So the reproducibility in research comes from how you describe the process as it occurred in the past days, so that someone else can take it and reproduce the research. The other thing is, I know it's a very short span of time. The ingredients, some of them have correctly mentioned, but I know if it is a large audience and we had some more time and also some repetitions because we only had 2-3 rows. So if that is the case, definitely the original idea would be a lot changed when it comes to the last part. So you can see grammatical mistakes appearing. Sometimes noodles become something else when it comes to the front row. So you can see this is actually about making consistent communications as well as time-independent communication. So if I read a paper from 1960, 1970, and try to reproduce the same thing 2020, I should be able to relate to what they have done and reproduce research from this date. So those who have received my PDF, that is called actually Standing on the Shoulders of the Giants, because we are progressing in science from our peers, from the people who have done research in the past. We are taking their steps, we are identifying the gap, and we are trying to close the gap in certain research domains. So when you are trying to look at a research per se, you have to identify what sort of a theme you are addressing, what sort of a scope you are addressing. So that is the main idea that I want to have with this discussion. So let's move on, because I think now we are trying to go into the research writing part. So what is a research paper? First thing, the research paper is written for academic peers and experts. So anyone from a particular domain, for example, my expertise is not in medical sciences or related fields. So I am not an expert or an academic peer in that sense, but I am a trained scientist. I'm a trained person in engineering. So I have a particular engineering domain. I'm working in spatial sciences and spatial data science, decision theory. So if that is my area, I can be called as an academic peer in that area. But that doesn't give me the right to read and comment on the work of other domains. So you are writing a research paper to a particular set of academic peers and experts. And the second part, where I also can be considered as a reviewer. So when it comes to reviewing in science, I should be able to appreciate a research paper that is published in a different field. So that is what we call the consistency in the knowledge. Unlike this other, I don't know whether it's right or wrong to call it, but if you look at Dhammika or some other things, you cannot appreciate because the way that they are thinking, the way that they are using the fundamental knowledge to create some knowledge cannot be accepted as a reviewer or a peer. So you are writing research papers, not only for academic peers and experts in your domain, you are writing research papers for reviewers and experts in other domains who can appreciate your work, maybe using your work to address some other problem. So what we call this, there are two things, interdisciplinary research and intradisciplinary research. So if you look at intradisciplinary research, what you are trying to do is progressing science in the discipline itself. So when it comes to reviewers elsewhere, if you are going for interdisciplinary research, maybe someone from physics domain has found something that can be used for maybe temperature mitigation or maybe predicting something else that can be used in environmental sciences. So that is interdisciplinary. So for those practitioners and reviewers and other people who are working in interdisciplinary activities, they should be able to appreciate your work as well. But that doesn't mean that you should be writing specifically for those domains other than you. So you are focusing on your specific domain, academic peers, experts, and of course, students. Now, if you look at the current publishing industry, if I give it a nutshell, what happens is there are PhD students, then you have postdoctoral fellows, and then there is a supervisor, grant supervisor. So that is how the hierarchy works. So in most cases, your papers will be assessed by some PhD student or an MSc student who is working in his or her field. So those are the people who are reading your work as well, right? So you have to understand it's not always the professors, it's not always the senior fellows. There will be students, undergraduate students who will be reading your work. Then, of course, journal editors. I'll come to this in a moment, so I'll just keep it as is. But these are the people who will help you to publish your work. Then policymakers and practitioners. Now, I don't think that given the nature of this country, we are really focusing on the policymakers and practitioners to that level when it comes to R&D. But the whole purpose of science is progression. So if you can't use your knowledge to develop your policies or improve your practices, then there's no point in doing research. It's for the mankind. So if you look at progressive societies, people take scientific papers seriously and they incorporate them in their policy-making decisions and practicing. So funding agencies, this is really important because now if you read grants, if you want to apply for the grants, you need to write a proposal addressing a certain issue and mentioning that you are trying to address this gap. So how do they assess your writing? How do they see whether your proposal is a fit for their domain, for their school? So they read research papers, they have an idea about the gap, and they need to identify the trends in research so that they can keep a track what will happen in next 20 years, what will happen in next 30 years. So if you, I think you are really familiar with these United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So they are set so that we can make our world a better place. So funding agencies certainly read your research work when it comes to accepting giving grants, and when you're applying for the grants, you need to have a good idea about research, other research that happens in your domain. And of course, the last part is general public. So I really don't see a point that we exclude the general public from this one. Of course, they are going to read your articles, even though they might not find them, they may not be following what you are saying, but again, you need to have a certain consistency. So when it comes to general public, they will be looking at a paper that is published by a renowned scientist or a scientist in a particular area or a research student. And if they cannot see a neat ordered writing, a neat ordered presentation, then of course there is no point. It doesn't really reflect on what you have done. So you have to be a polished individual so that they can accept your work. So it's actually not a single entity or your supervisor or someone who is giving you marks who is going to read this paper. It's actually a standalone knowledge. So you have to treat it as such. Right. Now, I'll come to the publishing industry in general. We have three layers when it comes to a research paper. Those who are looking at the screen from this may be seeing this clearly, and those who are looking at it from the projector, they might have some issues with layer 1, 2, 3. But anyways, the layer 1 is at the center. Layer 2 is surrounding the layer 1, and then layer 3 is the outside boundary. So the first thing is the text. So layer 1 is about your paper, right? So you do some work in a laboratory or you work with your peers, you come up with something and then you draft the research paper and it's there. And the second layer is discourse practice. Now, this is the place where the practice, the expertise comes into play, like your supervisor, the fellow research groups that you are linked with. So they will be assessing your work. So first thing is the supervisor getting this agreed or coming to a consensus about what you have done, and then about the immediate circle, we can call it the immediate circle, and then the socio-cultural practice. Now, when the paper reaches a socio-cultural practice, that is when the major booms happen in scientific work. For example, finding a cure for cancer, finding a cure for COVID-19. So these things happen when it expands from your layer 2 and it reaches the socio-cultural practice. So if you want to become an impactful researcher, this is where you should be aiming at, but maybe it happens in a very young age, or maybe it happens in a very, after you refine it for a long period of time. If you look at the Nobel laureates, they have received their Nobel prizes because of the things they have done in the early ages, early times of their career. So in 2019, 2020 Physics Nobel Prize, if you read what they have done and for what things they have received the Nobel Prize, you would see that these were done in their early part of their careers. Right. So in order to write well in science, the scientific publication need to be reproducible. Reproducible means it's not like do this, do that sort of a thing. It needs to be a coherent document that can be reproduced elsewhere. So first thing, the data should be available. The availability of data really dictates what sort of a thing you have done. So you can't just say that next day I woke up from a dream and then this is the pioneer for everything. So the code that was used for the analysis, right? Now this is becoming a practice in science and computer science and other related domains where you put it in the GitHub or some place where others can reproduce it. So it's no longer a secret code that applied for everything. Yes, it is there in proprietary analysis, like proprietary R&D developments, like patents, etc. But that's a different story. We're talking about science and communication. So when it comes to disseminating science information, you have to make sure that your code is available for everyone. An independent investigator can run the code on the data and generate figures and tables that match those published in original papers. So this is a very interesting topic. There are studies that have been done on this independent investigations where people or research groups have tried to replicate. If you are familiar with this meta-analysis and other stuff, people have tried to reproduce the research others have done, but most often that they have found the research cannot be reproduced because this is a big industry, and also you can understand what sort of things can happen in between. So that is not reproducible, and it is not science. It is not acceptable. So let's move on with our slides. Right. So this is the pace of a research paper you would see. Like in research publication, I think most of you have read this type of papers from the websites, right? So you read it from the Google or a Google Scholar, and then you go to this particular link, and there are companies that publish like Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Springer. So these publishers hold your research paper, and this is the pace of research paper that you would see. Now I have used one of my own papers just so that it's there. So like you have the Elsevier here, and then the topic, and of course who are the authors, the order of the authors. Although it's a very trivial matter right now, the first name appears as the leading author, the person who has compiled the paper, and the corresponding author is the person who has the initial idea, or the senior researcher who is involved in the research. It can be someone, of course, a junior as well, but the correspondence is about who is going to receive some comments about the paper outside of the publication, and then address those comments. So that is the whole idea of the correspondence. So because PhD students or the other student might not be working in the same institutions after they get their graduation. So that's the idea. And then the appearing order is the author order. So what not to do is putting someone else's name who has not authored the paper with you. So this is a very common practice nowadays. We call this ghosting, like ghost authors. So I'm not going to go to unethical publishing things to discuss it, because that will expand the scope of this discussion. But anyways, what not to do is crediting someone who has not engaged in the research with you for any matter, because this is a matter of knowledge. And the second thing, you can see that keyword. So there I have specifically taken this this particular depiction from a book. It's about keyword depth. It's about talking about the levels of knowledge covered in the keywords. For example, if now, like few minutes ago, I talked about cancer. I don't have any idea about cancer, but I talked about the keyword cancer. But there can be cancer like prostate cancer, breast cancer, different types of cancer. So that is actually domain-specific names. So when it comes to keywords, the specific keywords, the things that are in the right at the core, the bottom part of this triangle, inverted triangle, those are very specific. So if you are trying to improve the knowledge in a very specific part of the knowledge, that is very specific. Like if you look at general theory of relativity, that is specific knowledge improving the paradigm of physics. So how people look at the force, the time space. So that is very specific to the domain, but it has large number of applications and it expands the knowledge. If you look at the intermediate part of these keywords, they are more like everybody, like I said, even when I talked about cancer, I talked about this prostate cancer or breast cancer, because I know about them. That is intermediate. Everybody has an idea about it. But when it comes specific, there will be keywords like phenolic absorption, the meta, like some sort of keywords that go into those things. So those are specific things. Those are for the specific experts. Intermediate stuff that is somewhat is familiar to others in the expert community or people outside of the domain. And domain specific, the generic keyword, the breadth of this, the high frequency parts, those are like hunger, the addressing heat problems, climate change. So these are very high key, like it has a broader impact. It's a broad topic. So what we need to understand is your research paper or someone else's research paper is not addressing the world hunger issue or the world climate change as a whole. You are addressing a specific part, a specific gap in a particular domain. That is the first thing that you have to understand when you are starting to write a paper. Now, even in this case, if you look at the paper that I have shared here, we have put a topic, effects of pavement texture and color on urban heat islands, and experimental study in tropical climate. You can see the specific gap that we are trying to address, the specific part of the research that we are looking at, that the problem as a narrowed down research. So a paper, there are levels of knowledge that you're trying to address. A paper addresses a very specific point, a specific problem. So you have to have a good idea about the problem that you're addressing. Otherwise, you can't choose these topics properly, or you can't choose the keywords properly when your research is too big. So some people have seen taking sustainable development goals as whole, like addressing the world hunger issue, and then you just try to go into a research paper, which is not going to happen. You can't address large domain like generic keywords. You have to find the specific or intermediate keywords that you can address. Right. Now let's go into the practical stuff. So this is the reality of publication. Right. I think the do's and don'ts in research publications cannot be discussed without understanding the practicality of the real publication world. Now, the paper, the journals, I'm not paid for doing this, but I'm doing is I'm just giving you an example. I don't have any affiliation with these journals, but what I'm trying to say is the competition in research. Now, if you look at the urban climate, the Journal of Urban Management or Journal of Transport Geography, Sustainable Futures, you can see their site score, impact factor, acceptance rate, time to first decision, time to publication. So you can see, for example, this Journal of Transport Geography, the acceptance rate is 19%, which means if they receive 100 papers, they are only accepting 19. So you can imagine the level of sieving, the level of scrutinizing they do to take a paper in, so that it is published under their name, right? So that is the reality. So you can imagine, it's not like sometimes when we give comments to the students or people receive comments, they get discouraged. Imagine that, like thinking that, okay, it's a personal thing, but it's not personal, because if someone else is going to scrutinize your work in this level, if your immediate the person who is conducting your research or the guide, if he or she cannot bring you up to that level, then there is no point in sending it. Nobody is going to accept it if it is not beyond a certain power level. So you have to understand that. And the other thing is now research is coming more towards open access because of this new things about knowledge becoming open to the world. So these are related to funding and all sorts of things. It's beyond the discussions, but I want to caution you. Now, there are like, back in the days, there was the perception that open access journals are easy to publish. Like you pay something and the journal is going to accept whatever you're going to send, but now it's not, because even the top journals are allowing that open access feature. So anybody, if you are having the grant, if you have the capacity, you can send a very good paper and make it open access so that you get more visibility among your experts, among the other fields. So that is the difference of this open access and subscription based. So anyways, in both cases, in all essence, the competition is really high, the scrutiny is really high, and you can see the time it will take for you to publish your first paper or continue publishing. You can see time taken for the decision. So 8 weeks, 8 weeks. So this first decision can be the journal editor receiving your paper and reading whether it is acceptable to the standards set by the journal and whether it's worthy enough to be sent to the reviewers. But if the editor thinks that it's not good, so it's good you get the first decision very quickly. It's a desk rejection. So within 1 week or 2 weeks, you get a desk rejection. So you have to improve the one. Oh, fine, I'll talk about it in a moment. So that's one thing. And then the first decision typically means you send it to the reviewers, and the 2 or 3 reviewers, they will be reading your work and they will give their comments about your work. And the editor has the option to read the comments and decide whether this is worthy enough for a publication. Then you get a decision whether it is accepted or with minor corrections or major correction, etc. So that is the process. Okay. Right. So this is from one of my papers. Since I have the right to share, I'm sharing. This is a very detailed paper about some climate change stuff. So these are the comments that I received with myself and my co-authors. So you can see how the commenting works. I'm just sharing it because I have seen people commenting in a very rude way when it comes to reviewing. So it's not that the other person is so below the level. It's actually we are all trying to improve knowledge. So if you have the chance to comment on someone else's work, you need to be very careful and kind, and also push someone to do critical and important things so that the work is polished, not any personal grudges or anything like that. So these are comments that I received. So you can see how they evaluate the work. So I myself is a reviewer, so I know how important it is for someone else to publish, and also how much effort one puts in. So they appreciate what you have done, but again, there are some concerns that you need to address. So this is how you get your first decision. With the reviewer's comment, editor assessing what you have done, and the reviewers giving you comments on whatnot. So you can read what the comments are. So these are the review one's comments and the other reviewer two's comments. You can see how specific one is and how specific the other is. So you have to gauge on the levels of accept, like what you are going to address and what you are not going to address. It doesn't mean that you are going to address everything, but if you are opting not to address a certain comment in a certain way, you should have the capacity to tell why you are doing it, and also honoring the comment in a way that you don't screw up the process. So you can mention why you are not doing this, or why you are doing it somewhere else, like in another way, right? So you can see the comments. So we have already addressed them, and it's already published. So I just wanted to share that because a few students from my past, like last year, they completely abandoned an idea of publishing because some reviewers gave them some comments, right? But actually those comments were really good, right? Like I'm used to being blamed, so it's not something that I'm unfamiliar with. But as young researchers, some some of you might be finding it difficult to cope with somewhat strict comments, I would say. So it's up to you to understand why these comments are given and to address in a more objective way, right? So let's, with all these things in mind, let's start to prepare to write. Okay. So the first thing, why papers are rejected. So why papers keep on getting rejected. So the first thing is sent to the wrong journal. So you do a nice work in computational physics and you send it to biology journal. So that doesn't work in that way. So you work in one area and you have to send the journal. You have to first find the niche in your research. I'll come to that in my coming slides. Don't get me wrong, because this is the whole process is what not to do and what to do in writing. Because as I said, doing research is analogous to writing papers. So if you don't do this, then you are not writing it effectively. Okay, so that is the theme of the presentation. Don't get me wrong that I'm preaching on how to publish. That actually the part of writing is publishing. So you send it to the wrong journal and it doesn't fit the journal's aims and scope. Obviously, it's a desk rejection. And the editor is asking you, like, think about a different journal. So that's definitely what's going to happen. And then it's not a proper journal article. Now, if you are working in a research group that has some experienced researchers or people who have the idea of publishing, this would rarely happen, but this can happen. Say someone wants to send a journal article because he's looking for a promotion or some other activity, maybe getting his PhD accepted, higher degree accepted. So you get these kind of papers. They are not up to the standard, therefore they will be rejected. Like some other, clearly a thesis chapter, like some people copying the thesis chapter, directly sending it as a journal paper. It doesn't work like that, right? And then too long. So a lot of people, since I'm talking with a lot of undergraduates about research, ask me how long a research paper should be. Okay, so how long a research paper should be is also dependent on how good your writing is, right? If you are writing really bad, sometimes the things that you want to include may not be included in a journal paper that I'm saying this is the size of the journal paper. But if your writing is good, like in some acceptable form, a letter, we call it a letter, it's not a paper, but it's a shorter form. So that is 3,000 words, 1,500 to 3,000 words, right? And a journal paper can go up to 5,000 words to 8,000 words. So a review can be 8,000 to 10,000 and book chapter somewhere around that 10,000 plus. So it depends on the way that you summarize, the way that you write and the style and everything. Some people are very good at condensing ideas of 800 words into 400 words. So you can imagine a person with that skill sending a paper of 5,000 words. So it is much more trimmed and very polished. So that's how it is. And then it's too long means people will not read it. As I said at the very beginning, nobody is paid to read your work. So they will be not reading this. And then poor regard to the conventions of the journal. Failure to consult notes for contributors to conventions of academic writing generally. Now, if you want to publish something, the first thing is when you start to do research, identify the journals that are relevant to your research, because there is a style. Like for example, there are journals that use certain style, maybe presenting figures in a certain way, presenting maps in a certain way, presenting data in a certain way, writing styles. So you have to refer to them and try to mimic their styles. Otherwise, the journal will find the odd sheep. They are not getting this black sheep in because they are maintaining a certain standard. So you have to follow them. And then you have failed to say anything of significance. Right? Some people writing things that are, they are, as I said, no idea. So there's no point. And then not properly contextualized, no theoretical framework like the Dhammacipanyasing. And then you have strappily presented and clearly not proofread. So why this is really bad, I'll tell you why. Now, say that you are working as an editor and you receive a journal paper. Someone is trying to get it to your journal, and the editor himself is the responsible person to gauge it at the first level. So the editor is going to read the paper and send it to the reviewers. Say that reviewers find this scrappily presented cannot prove it. A reviewer can be a professor working in a very prestigious institute, doing presentations daily, going into other projects. His schedule and time is really important, right? So if he or she receives this kind of a work, then he will not be receiving the editor's notes again, right? He will obviously say, this is a crappy work. I'm not going to review the ones for you again. So 2 or 3 such bad examples will be bad for the review, the journal, because the journal cannot continue. If those experts are not going to review, to be in part of the peer review process, then they cannot publish good research. So that is the whole point of it. So to maintain the quality of the journal, they will be looking at this, the proofreading and everything. And then the 10th point is, I think it needs to be there for the completion, but I think this needs to be clearly understood. We are not doing unethical research and also not trying to sabotage someone else's image. So that's part of the research. Okay, right. Coming back to finding a journal. So there are some tools available. This research rabbit thing is available as a free tool. So if you have a particular research paper referred to you by someone else or shared with you, you can type the name here. Since I'm not talking about them in general, I'm just skipping through. This is called Research Rabbit. So it's an AI tool. You can type on your the most relevant paper to you, and then find out the link between the papers here and there, so that you can find the most closer work to your domain. So you are equipped with the pedagogy, the understanding of that particular gap. That's Research Rabbit. And then there's a similar tool called Connected Papers. You can have it. It was an open source one a few months ago, but now they have started to make it commercialized. So you can do, I think, 5 papers here. You can get the connections as well. You can see how they are, the islands emerge in the search. So you can identify which research follow that particular intermediate keyword strength I mentioned at the beginning. So if you remember the inverted triangle, the intermediate keyword strength come from the islands, like which domain expertise is covered in a particular cluster of papers. So this connectivity, visually you can see how they are connected, how further they are apart. So the further they are, that means it becomes more of interdisciplinary. If they are closer, that means intradisciplinary. So you are looking at the domain-specific knowledge, right? Now, I'll move on. Then this one is an open source tool again, Dimensions. So Dimensions AI, it's freely available. You can create an account. So you go there and then type. I think it's not that difficult to understand, but I just share the resources so that you can continue. Okay, right. Now this is the part I need to specify very quickly and very thoroughly. As I said previously, your research is scrutinized by different levels, the editor, the peer review, and all. And then the next part of your publication is actually being indexed by an entity that dictates the quality of knowledge, the quality of your publication. So this is indexed research. The Scopus index is, if you look at in general, Scopus contains large collection of different domain research. So if there are levels like Q1, Q2, Q3, which means the high impact journals, low impact journals, likewise. As I said, the prestigious journals like the journals that are directly focusing on particular knowledge domain, they have very high impact. Impact in the sense, the other experts are referring to this particular journal with a high regard. So if something is published there, they consider it as something that has a value to that particular. It doesn't mean that other journals are bad, but it says there's certain popularity, a certain acceptance in this Q1. So this Scopus web index or the Scopus database index means the quality of the papers. And this is the Web of Science. It is rather compact version of Scopus, but when it comes to Web of Science, it's actually uh, uh, more prestige than the Scopus. So it is bit high end, but sometimes the Q1 journals found in Scopus are Q1 in Web of Science as well, but sometimes it's not the same. Right. So, so I'll come to the trend topics where you prepare to write. So if someone say started a topic to write on something, then you need to have an idea about the trends and the emerging topics, because now a few of my students received a comment from a reviewer saying that the paper you need to show the novelty of the paper. What is the novelty of the paper? So they came to me and have this discussion. What is this novelty? How do we say what is novel and all? So novelty, what do you mean by novelty? The novelty comes from the topic that is currently in demand, right? So for example, if you look at statistics, in 2003, 2004, statistics as is just a topic, statistics is a topic. But nowadays, you have a lot of things associated with statistics. It can be statistical learning, it can be data science, it can be domains of data science, it can be machine learning, it can be deep learning in some cases. So the novelty comes from which novel area that you are trying to address. So if your research has a particular corner, a particular target that you are trying to address, this novelty domain, this area, you need to show it from this emerging, from the papers that you can find elsewhere, like people who are writing the trend topics. For example, if it is like in 2019 to 2021, early 2021, you can find a lot of papers about COVID-19, coronavirus. It became an emerging topic. So the novelty in that case would be to maybe identify the coronavirus, to stop the progression of the virus, how you can use different types of maybe technical terms, like some data science terms or something, to find ways to stop the mitigation of COVID. So these are emerging topics. This is the novelty. So to find the novelty in a very saturated science, like a science where already the fundamentals are very strictly founded, like physics. Like if you want to find a total paradigm shift, that is going to be a novel paper, but that has to be a very well thought of paper. Like in 1905, Albert Einstein changing the paradigm of how force and the time is identified, the way that you quantify the time and space. So that is a paradigm shift. So that is novel, but that novelty is very difficult to capture. So you have to have a good idea about your novelty. And it comes from this topic analysis, the way research emerges in that particular area. So that is one thing to write. So I just gave you another hint of what sort of times, the levels of attributes you can find in a paper. A particular topic, you have time span, sources, different documents, the annual growth rate, how citations and publications emerge in a particular topic over the years. So this is just for the illustration purposes, but preparing to write means understanding this, because you can spend 8 to 9 months, 1 year of your life just doing something else, and then suddenly coming at the end when you are preparing the manuscript for the paper, then someone says, oh, it has already been published. Oh, this is not a new thing, or it is not the domain that you are looking for. All the cited papers are outdated. So you can find so much of these comments. So if you find this, that means you haven't done this preparing to write part. You have to identify the novelty in your work, the gap that you are trying to address. So that is part of writing. What not to do is not doing this, right? So if you are really focusing on publishing your work, you have to focus, and also to find your novelty in the research. So this is about, again, some connectivity in the topics, so you can do this. And again, the clustering, right? Now I come to the core part of this discussion, effective research writing, do's and don'ts. So I'll start with what to write and what sort of things are expected. So, and as far as this discussion is concerned, I think at this moment you are familiar with what is good writing. So what good writing does is it communicates an idea clearly and effectively. So nobody will tell you that your writing is bad if you are writing clear and effective sentences. So that is a simple idea. If someone is saying that I can't understand what you are saying, then understand, try to get an idea why that person is saying so before you try to make it personal. Because sometimes what you have written may not be really clearly communicated to the other person. The reader is everything. So you become the good reader would help you to write well. So if you read it again. Sometimes we used to do this, like you write something and keep it, and you read it in the next day, because then your the fixation that you had on the idea is gone. So when you read it again, if you see still that you can't understand what you have written, that means your writing is bad, or you need to improve your writing. Okay, so good writing is elegant and stylish. So this is really evident in some writers. Like some writers use like short sentences, long sentences, short sentences, long sentences. They combine sentences, like give a topic sentence and then give a conclusion sentence at the end. So my rule of thumb for you to write something clearly, try to understand the context and try to jot down the main points where you can explain the thing that you want to write in an order where like main topic sentences can be formed. For example, in the case of the noodle thing, you can start with the introduction part, thinking about why this activity was done or what sort of an activity is this. So the topic sentences can come what this is, right? Then the second thing would be to give a conclusion of the topic sentence. So if you can squeeze these two ideas within 4 sentences, then that means your writing can be read very cleanly. So you move from that sentence to the other sentence. The easier way of visualizing this is you imagine the writing as islands. The closer islands are more related. The far away islands are not really related, like we call this in statistics or autocorrelation, the spatial autocorrelation. The further away, they are not related to the first. But if you take a look at the seventh island is more closer to the 6th island. So your 7th paragraph should be connected with the 6th paragraph. But if you read them separately, the first paragraph and the 7th paragraph may be too further apart. So you have to cluster the ideas in a way that the order is clear. So that is the basic idea of how to keep the clear and effective communication going, and elegant and stylish. Right. So further moving in, these are the references that I have kept, like my supervisors and the people who have helped me to get in this career. They have suggested me several books all along my way. So the Elements of Style is the first book that I received, like the first book reference that I got as an undergraduate. So I read about the Elements of Style as my first book. But then as I moved in my other work, I started reading about science research writing and how to write and publish. So this How to Write a Better Thesis was the book that really catch my ideas, because like this book is really well written, and I have a sort of a good flavor for this book, because it contains how to conduct the full PhD thesis from starting from the beginning to the end. So if you have maybe some sources to refer, please try to go and most of the ideas that I combine here are from these books and my experience, of course. And this is one of the best courses in writing, Writing in Science, Stanford Online by Dr. Christine. So this is available in YouTube. So anyone who is interested in learning this, it's a 5-hour or 4-hour thing. You can go and watch this. So, you may not develop the full set of skills just by watching this, but as you move in your career, the more you get to know about different things, the more you start to appreciate. So the better you learn. So it's actually like improving yourself. The first time that you started playing cricket or playing any other sport, you may not be gripping the bat correctly, or you may not know the way how a batsman gets out, or all these things. But with time, the more you play, the better you become. So But if you don't have the idea, you can't make yourself a better person. So I encourage you to look at them. And so first thing, how to write and what should be done is reading and paying attention and imitating. So as kids, if you remember I don't think nobody has this very clear understanding of what happened when they were young, like 2 years or 1 year old. But when you start learning a language, the first thing that you do is imitate. What you are doing is you are imitating the other person. The way that you speak, the movements in hands. So you try to be as communicative as possible to the other person because you want to say something, right? And then the more you become equipped with the imitation, because I'm doing imitation as well. I'm speaking a foreign language, and I am doing this because I'm imitating what I have learned. Like I'm trying to imitate the way that I speak. Everybody does that. The person from the birth to the point that they are right now, they have been imitating the communication that others do. Because if I do some blabberish thing, you don't understand. You are listening because you are in the resonance what I do. So imitation is a very good thing. Imitation and plagiarism are two different things, right? So I'll come to what is plagiarism, but imitating means you look at a sentence, okay, this is well written, it is short, he or she has used verbs, so I can use them. So there are certain words that I can use, so that pedagogy can be developed from imitation and paying attention, right? Writing is not only text, it is also figures and the order in which you are ordering things. Okay, so write in a diary. This is something that I encourage the students to do, which is you keep some sort of a notebook, you write something, and then try to improve on that. Like one of my colleagues from this art faculty, he told me that the way they develop the sketches, the drawings, some drawings will not emerge like in one day. You draw a sketch, then next week you draw another sketch, so much of things, and then suddenly the final outcome emerges. So you have to have a helicopter view of what you are going to do. The sketching part is really important to be a good writer. Either you write, don't try to use these shortened forms of writing, like WhatsApp, text messages, etc. Because that will not help you to write professional words, right? So if you inculcate the culture where you email your findings to your supervisor every 1 week or every bi-week when you are trying to communicate before you meet the supervisor or your research guide, if you can write an email what you have done, that will help you in long term to organize what you have done. The other thing is, because emails are well organized in your inbox, you can go back, refer to them, organize them at the end, where you can actually talk about what you have done and what went wrong. So it's a very good practice I encourage students to do, because it's already there. You don't need extra software, you don't need extra stuff to do these things. It's a very simple thing. You take a note, you write an email, and inform your supervisor or your person, the group members, before you meet them. So the more you do, you realize what sort of language you need to use, how you need to communicate, right? And then talk about your research before trying to write about it. So this is something that I do. Like I talk about my research and try to understand whether that makes sense, right? Because if I can't explain that to someone else, then there's no point in writing. If I can't explain what I have done in 3-4 sentences, then I can't explain it to someone else as well. So it's very important to talk about what you do and then try to write about it in a way that someone else would understanding just from the writing itself, right? And then write to engage your readers, try not to bore them. As I said, no one is paid to read your work. So if someone is not enjoying what you're writing, then there's no point in writing. So the audience, the expert audience, if someone is reading your work and understanding what you're trying to say, then you are a winner. Then you become the writer that you want. Otherwise, the writing is just an accumulation of words. So write to engage your readers, try not to bore them, and accept that writing is hard for everyone. So if you don't accept this thing, if you become too egoistic about what you have done, that everybody needs to understand, appreciate what they have done, right? That's not going to happen. You have to be as open-minded as possible. You can see why a person is rejecting this. If multiple persons are saying that I can't understand what you are saying, then you have to go back and see why it is not really well received. Then you work on that, because it's hard for everybody. If it is easy, then everybody can do it. And there would be a number of publications everywhere. It's not going to happen. It's hard for everyone. You have to do it. So the last thing is what I won't really tell you. It's actually not writing. What makes writing better is not writing. It's actually revising. The more you read your work, the more you become fluent in what you have done, and the better you become, squeezing things. If you can now, for example, this mentality I have seen in most of the I don't mention the exact regions, but I have seen this, that the more you write becomes a better thing. Like if you write 10,000 words with this number of pages, it becomes a big thing. Okay, I have produced this much of it, but it doesn't make sense. Knowledge is not about the weight that you have put in. If you can write the same idea in 200 words, right, what will happen? The knowledge becomes more crisp, and someone else can understand it in a very short span of time and produce and reproduce what you have done. So the idea of publishing or doing research is not about showing your ego that I have produced a 10,000 page thesis. It's not that. It's actually how good your communication is and how clear you are in saying what you have done. So if you can do the same thing in 200 words, why 10,000 pages? So revising will help you to jot down, to trim down, to focus on what you have done, more than just going with jargons and etc. etc. So that's the main thing that I have to revise what you do. Right, I'm not going to go with the exercise, but let me give you a brief, just read about this if you can see this clearly. So for the sake of this discussion, I'll just read it. So the function responsible for converting raw data into valuable business insight is called business analytics. It is an intensive field and combining expertise from machine learning. So this is one phrase that I copy pasted from one of the journals about deep learning in business. So this is, now you can see the questions that I have asked. So someone might say, yes, this is readable, and yes, I mean, this is it, because that's why it is published. This is from a published paper, right? So it's published. Somebody can say that it's good, right? Yes, it's good, because that's why somebody has read it and then somebody has accepted it. So it's published. But can we improve it? Yes. Now, if you look at this paragraph, I'm talking about you, the person who is reading this, the person who is going to use this. Imagine you are the person who has written this, and someone else is going to use this work for their research. So the way it is communicated may not really get into your brain in the first instance that you read it. Okay, so that makes you an unreadable writer. You have written something, but someone else needs 2-3 attempts to read through it and understand it. Now, let's see what I changed it. I'm not saying this is the best, but I'm saying I changed it. I started with the main topic, business analytics unifies knowledge from different diverse disciplines such as machine learning. So at the beginning, I give the bracket, why this is done, and then I give the domain experts transform raw data into valuable business. So if you are from a particular domain that is given here, when you read it, you may get an idea like, okay, that particular sentence is talking about this, right? But I'm not saying that the way that I have written is the best, because that is the whole point of being in this discussion, right? This can be improved as well, depending on the way that you revise, the way that you want to communicate. That's a different story. But what I'm saying is, this is what scientific writing is. You can take someone else's work, reproducible research work, take it, and then transform it into something that is useful for your communication. So if you are talking about business analytics in general, or talking about some particular topic in this one, this particular narrative might be suitable than the narrative that I have given in the previous case. So it's all about taking the ingredients and then maneuvering it in the way that you want it. So I just gave you 2 examples, the use of words. Sorry. the use of words and the use of that, because that here refers to business trends. So because of that, this becomes not supports, it's support. So because this thing is talking about the business, foreseeing business trends. I just want to highlight it because I'm not talking about scientific writing as a course here, but what I'm saying is these things are paying attention. Like if you pay attention to this, you can understand and also get an idea why trimming down ideas and making them firm is more important than writing lengthy sentences, because they are open to interpretation and you can have different ideas. But if you write clear and very straightforward sentences, it's very easy for the reader to understand, right? Okay, so let's move on. Complex ideas do not necessarily need to be complex language. Scientific writing should be easy and even enjoyable to read. So no one is paying free to work again. So if it is enjoyable and people are appreciating what you are doing, then people will read. So there are authors, even though I like to read their work. So that's how. Okay, so about what not to do and what to do. This is about writing and reading, of course. If someone has followed this thing and you are reading, then the comma, colon, dash, parenthesis, semicolon, period, or full stop, these have a certain power of stopping the idea. So if you are putting a full stop for a sentence after writing something, that means that particular sentence is over. But if you are putting a comma, that particular idea is taken to a different movement, like maybe separating things like that. So this is just for the reference, but I can't tell you the whole story here, but identify the level of power and the separation each of these things give you. And then become good readers will help you to become good writers as well when you are writing. Again, the dash and the parentheses, how formal and informal writing works. So I'll just skip through this. Right, so I've given an example in how these things can be used in writing. So the first one is about, it's about using the colon. Here, as you can see, colon separates, the power of separation is high in a colon. So you lump that idea at the first instance. So the idea here is, in one project, we have a whole range of specialists. So that is the idea. So that's the helicopter view. You dive in and then you have what sort of specialist. So if you give that first thing and last thing in the first, then you read all these things and then you try to lump up a major idea that is outside. So that's the idea I want to tell you. So just practice how the sentences can be formed, how things can be looked at from different point of view. Then this is something I want to tell as well, not to do plagiarism and what sort of plagiarism are there. You have act of copying and pasting sentences directly without giving credit. So, and also, I mean, even you give credit, that doesn't mean you are allowed to copy paste entire passages, and making minor modifications also is not considered. So let me give you an example. You must understand the material well enough to put it in your own words, work from memory. Draw your own conclusions. Do not mimic the original author's sentence structure. Because as I said, the style as it develops, right, makes who you are. Right? If you look at Leo Tolstoy, like Gladwell, all these the writers, Martin, who's the writer of the George R.R. Martin, they have a style. So that particular style is there. If you copy someone else's work, like someone else's sentences as is, the experienced reader can find it. Like for me, if someone copies something from an expert, like the journal that I read, I can see that this is not the same person, right? So that style is there. So if you do this, you think that a software is needed to find this, but it is not. It is easily identified if someone is familiar with the text he or she is reading. So the style is the thing here. So you are not the person who has produced that particular sentence, right? So you must understand material well enough, memory, draw your conclusion, do not mimic the original author sentence structure. So this is very easy if you jot down the main topics and then try to come up with jumbling things here and there. So I can suggest you some AI tools, but I know it has been used a lot for plagiarism, therefore I'm not going to emphasize on that. But if you can do this trick and try to find out what has happened in that particular way of things, right, then you can find your own style. You allow the AI to change it, but use it and then see whether it is there, the one that you really want to tell. You can use it. But the thing is, if you just copy paste the whole thing, the style is not there. So the human is not there. The person, scientist is not there, right? So I'll give you an example of plagiarism. I quoted this from this course, Stanford online course. So we have the plagiarism example, 1995 paper, original paper, directly taken and just put with some changes. So this is directly plagiarism because you are not changing the ideas, or no, you are not using them to convey what you really want, because 1995 paper is a 1995 paper. The 2002 paper is something that you want to tell. So this particular context needs to be directed to the ideas, linked to the idea that you want to say, right? So there are two ways of plagiarism. One thing is plagiarizing others' work. The other thing is plagiarizing your own work, right? Some people, because they are tired, they take the publications from the past years and then you just copy paste the same methodology, the same conclusion, and then just change something here. That is because of this race to publish. But as a person, I don't like that. So all work needs to be original, and the personal plagiarism, the self plagiarism should also be avoided, right? So the next thing is again another example how the plagiarism has worked. So this is really common because some people don't read references, they just take the references, copy paste it as is. So what if someone else has totally changed the idea of that paper and try to say something, some contradictory terms that was not there in the paper? So if this particular paper is to be retracted, the whole idea that you have given in your paper will be retracted as well, the effort that you have put. So imagine when you're publishing, this is a serious business. So if you do something and the paper is retracted, your whole career will be in jeopardize. So when somebody is really critical about your references and whether you have read this thing, have you referred to the original source, that means they are really critical about this. So you can see even the references have been copied and just putting it there, right? Visualizing parts, I have done this one in a different discussion, so I'm just showing you. You can visualize things in the quantitative results in different ways. So it depends on the levels of communication that you want. So identifying the clear communication that you really want for your data is very important, because writing is not just text crunch. It's actually the philosophy that you take forward, the colors that you take, the sizes of your images, the way you want to say a particular thing. So it really is that art of doing things. It's actually science plus art. So you can think of some of the visualize. For example, if I give you COVID-19 cases and just draw a bar chart, nobody will understand the context. So you have to find why you need a map. So in the case of when you just need to compare the values, you don't need a map. So you have to have a good idea of the way and the philosophy behind your study. So some complex stuff. And this is just final thoughts. So this is one of my papers as well. So this is the only data set that we got. Okay. So I'm telling you, this is the only data set that we got from that particular study, right? So we wrote a paper from this, and it's all about how we look at different slices of the data. I'll come to the visualization in the next slide, but this is just the site that is there, the photos that we have taken. This is the table, the Excel table that contained it. So these are the two things that we had, right? So by analyzing and writing the different slices properly, so this is the publication that we created. So it's actually looking at the big picture and the small picture and the specific picture in a more philosophical way, the trimmed down thoughts, the coherency of your arguments. These are the things actually matter at the end. So if you want to be an effective writer, you have to think about the big picture, why you are writing, to whom you are writing, and what sort of problems you are going to address. So if you can think this through as you move along your journey, you will become effective writers, but it comes with practice. So if you don't start now, it will never happen. So you can start now. Right. Thank you. So if you have any questions, you can.
Many thanks, Dr. Sandun. Big thanks on behalf of the BRU, and many thanks for accepting our invitation also. So, audience, if you have any quick questions to ask, so you're very welcome to ask questions.
I have just muted the mic here. So I mean, you can hear what they are asking. I just muted.
Okay.
Yeah, from here also.
Yeah, you can also ask.
Yeah.
So does it have to be if it is about brands to be uploaded in brands for start?
Yeah. Like there cannot be authors who so many authors as first author. First author needs to be the first author. All the others are part of the journey, but the first author is the one who has this full philosophy, that the style that I was referring to. So in the case of this number of authors being there, like you have to predict them. Like I'll come to that topic. It's a very interesting topic. Like there's a culture that if someone even helps you to, even someone switch off the laboratory lights, that person becomes an author in the paper. This is not how it works. So a research group, there is a part in the paper that you put acknowledgements. The people who come for the acknowledgements are not the authors. That's the first thing, right? So you have to be clear on that. When it comes to authors, as I said, the main author is the person who has the idea of how the work is progressed, the progression of the work. There cannot be many first authors. The second author may be the person who is closely involved, maybe doing the corrections, maybe giving the ideas of how about changing this, how about changing that, right? So there is a misconception in the academia that if there's a supervisor, that supervisor imagines that the student needs to write exactly what he or she is thinking. That is the point where this authorship comes, because then the supervisor says, I wrote the whole thing, you didn't do anything, right? That's not the case. We should be, supervisors should be inculcating new minds, new authors, new styles. So the first author can have second author if that person has contributed maybe with the figures or maybe with some other write-ups, etc. So the hierarchy actually is the hierarchy that we already have. The corresponding author can share, pay the part where he or she may be leading different types of things. So for example, I give an example. Let's say that there is a research group who is trying to improve the size of a mango, right? So there's a mango plant, and then they are trying to improve the size of the mango. So one set of researchers may be doing using some fertilizers, whether fertilizers are actually helping to improve the size of the mango. Some set of researchers might be doing photoelectric stuff, like putting different lights on the mango tree and trying to see whether the mango size increase. Now, to do this, there may be a grant or some sort of a funding mechanism or a leading researcher involved in. So, if I'll name the group A as the fertilizer group, group B as the photoelectric stuff group. So imagine there's a paper from group A. So the entire group members who are doing the group A work, the fertilizers are, the professor who is involved in cannot be the main author if he or she has not written it. He can be the corresponding author. That's how the corresponding author works. The person who is handling the large set of things like the knowledge, how it is disseminated, how the the arms and missiles, how it happens. So the whole picture, like going for the sustainable goal of mitigating hunger, the person who is leading it is the corresponding. The person who is like thinking about this, like designing the experiment, the person who has an idea what things have happened, that is the first author. All the other, the second, third, fourth, you can flip around it, all these things, that's possible. But the idea that comes from you should be the idea that is in the paper if you are the first author. So there's a requirement in PhDs in other countries where you have to publish. So in that publication, they specifically ask which percentage is your contribution. So if you are not the first author, they will not consider you as the contributor or the person who has produced that work. So you need to have at least one main authored publication in those criteria, in those particular cases. So identify what you have done, and nobody is allowed to like totally change the whole thing, then he or she becomes the first author. So it's a very tricky thing. I have seen this actually. People trying to claim credits for others' work, and because they have power or because they are over someone else, that's a different story. But when it comes to this, the pure idea of knowledge and scientific publications, this is how it works. The corresponding author is the person who's leading a large vision, and then the person who has written the first author, the one who has conducted based on the vision provided by the group or the things. So that's how it works.
Okay, any other question? Okay, so sometimes I have noticed sometimes the authors, when they are kind of including the results, they try to include all the results that they got. So, but there's kind of a way to summarize. Can you briefly kind of give an idea?
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. So some people, I'll come to that answer this one in a different way. So this happens in writing as well, right? Some people try to write everything that they have done when they can trim out and then come up with a very, very simple thing because because it's actually time. The effort and time that one has invested, they need to reflect that on the paper that the person has authored. So that's why I told in some cultures, I don't name the culture, putting 10,000 pages or a large set of things means they have worked really hard on that. So that thing is there. So this result thing comes because they have this mentality that all the things they have done should be given. Now, I can't answer it as a yes or no question because sometimes the supplementary materials might be needed for understanding certainty. For example, if you are from the chemical fields, chemical engineering or chemistry science, there are this FTIR, XRD, some chemical analysis stuff. Those are for material characterization. If you are not really focusing on material characterization, those may not be really important. But to make the credibility of the research, to improve the credibility of the research, you have to provide them the maybe X-ray images or all these things, if it is the medical research, the ethical clearance and all these things. So they come under the supplementary materials. You can put them. Only the materials that are really conveying the idea should be there in the results. Because as I said, nobody is paid to read your work. So if you have FTIR, all sorts of images and results there just to show that you have worked really hard, then nobody can understand what exactly you are trying to say. So if it is about improving the, say you develop a drug and then to show that this drug is really working, then there may be like 5 or 6 figures that really matter, like how you have put this drug and what sort of mechanism works in this one, and the cohorts in the test and the experiment groups, and then how to show with temporal variations how the blood vessels change, etc., etc. So you have to have this idea. If you have this idea, then you can show each step as one figure or one result for your discussion. As I think the document that I shared also contains some ideas about discussion. So if you have this, then you can understand what results should be excluded and what should not be. And so in some cases, I've seen people choosing only the positive results for the publication. So that is a very critical and delicate topic to discuss because some people, even we can talk about a lot of things, but the reality is different. So sometimes people may be compelled to show results that are only positive.
Yeah, for
So-
example, statistic, they are kind of trying to insignificant kind
Yeah.
of result.
Yeah, and to add to that, say the knowledge evolves, and in some cases, some would say we need to have the negative results as well to come up with an understanding whether that particular positivity is actually positive. In that cases, I think those kind of things are there. Like some highly cited papers are cited not because of their actual contribution, but because they are wrong. So this thing is there.
Thank you. So is there any questions from the online audience?
There are chat messages. I don't know.
I think so. Okay, so I guess then we
Thank you everyone for joining. That concludes the session. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
recording.